according to ESPN Shams Charania, which a employer for Shams, and I'm not quite used to saying out loud yet, Wes. It's still weird to me that he's at ESPN. He's going to be reevaluated in a week, and this comes on the heels of a really good Tim Bontemps story at ESPN, how Philly is going to really give a ton of maintenance to Joel Embiid. He said he might not play back-to-backs. It doesn't seem like he's ever going to play a back-to-back again his NBA career. So if you're looking to see Philly and he's in your city on the second night of a back-to-back, look forward to seeing Tyrese Maxey and Paul George instead. That's I think another conversation about if that's a good or a bad thing. But Wes, I think this is long overdue. This kind of maintenance plan for Embiid and for Philly to take the long view is vastly overdue. I understand that Embiid wanted to chase individual accolades. I understand him on the court has meant they are incredible every minute he's on, and they're really bad every minute he's off. But the end goal here, now that he's won the MVPs and he's done all of this stuff, it's about chasing a title. And to me, this is the only way you're getting Embiid to a title. This is the way. This is what it's going to require to get Embiid healthy in June and keep him as healthy as possible up until June.
Right, and even that is obviously not a guarantee. Everything that comes with Joel Embiid, there's so much risk reward with him, right? I mean, maybe more than any other player in recent NBA history, where when he's on the court, he's as dominant as anybody. The guy won an MVP for a reason. Chasing Wilt Chamberlain's record last year of having more points than minutes played.
Yeah,
because he was that dominant when he's on the court, and then of course the knee injury and he gets hurt, and it's just not the same after that. I don't know if it's overdue. I think just every player goes through a point in his career where you do chase the individual stuff. And Joel Embiid wouldn't be who he is if he didn't have the MVP. He wouldn't be who he is if he wasn't chasing those individual heights that come with being that are on the resume of most of the all-time greats. And that's not me saying that Joel Embiid is an all-time great, but he has a lot of similarities with some of them in terms of the stuff on his resume and the things that he's accomplished. The one thing he obviously has not accomplished is the NBA championship. By the way, neither has Paul George.
Sure.
By the way, neither has Daryl Morey. Right? Like, these are all guys.
Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse has the NBA championship.
Is the one guy.
Yeah, the one guy. And so you look at Embiid, Morey, Paul George, staples of the league for the last better part of the last decade, I'll put it that way. None of them have a championship. And they're all working right now together to go ahead and win that championship. So when you hear Joel Embiid talk about this stuff about you'll probably never see me play another back-to-back in the rest of my career. By the way, for Paul George, I don't know if he's going to be playing the second night of back-to-backs. That hyperextension, he's going to be reevaluated in a week. So that's probably the best case scenario for that news, especially the way that it looked in the moment, where I was like, oh boy, like really with this guy again with a leg injury? But the fact that he's going to be reevaluated in a week is a good sign, and he should be available for the start of the regular season, but TBD on that. But Daryl Morey has also been talking about a lot of this stuff in that Tim Bontemps story and in other media spaces at Media Day and all these things, where he's also very aware of the situation that the Sixers are in now. They did a good job in re-signing Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid to another contract extension. Paul George of those three is on the shortest contract, and he's under contract for 4 more years. You and I have talked about how it feels like the drama is behind this team now. Okay, We don't know if the injuries are behind this team, though, and that's always going to be baked into the Joel Embiid experience. And so, yeah, this is something that has to happen. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it feels like this is the only way that the 76ers can exist going forward. But I'll throw this back to you now, Chris, but didn't Paul George just go through this with Kawhi Leonard? And he sort of signed up for a very similar experience with Joel Embiid? Now, obviously, the two situations are a little bit different, but
I think
for
they're
Paul
more
George
than
to be doing this again is a little surprising.
I think they're more than a little different, though, Wes. Like, I think Kawhi, everything we've known about him and his injury stuff and how it's been reported out and just what we know about him as a personality, he is, like, incredibly stubborn and almost not in a way that's like, I want to get someone back on the court. It's like he's, like, stubbornly private. He's suddenly aloof from the rest of his team, right? Like, that is one of the things with him. Whereas with Embiid, I feel like everyone's kind of knows what's up with Embiid. Like it's not really like a hidden thing when he gets hurt.
And with Embiid's injuries, it's a lot more bad luck with his stuff.
Yes.
Versus Kawhi, where it just feels like this is more of a chronic issue. with everything that's going on there, and he's obviously out now with the inflation in the net knee, and that, according to some reports, is the thing that kind of sent him packing from Team USA and all that stuff. So I do agree with you there. And for Joel Embiid, there's just it feels like that's out there for him, whereas with Kawhi, in terms of reaching the pinnacle and winning a championship, it feels like that's still out there for him to go grab and go get it if this maintenance program works out and he's healthy for the playoffs. With Kawhi, that stuff just feels like it's over. It really, Paul George leaving the Clippers, and I know they got James Harden in the new stadium and all that stuff, but it kind of feels like the championship winning phase for Kawhi Leonard is done, and the Clippers are sort of slow playing whatever the next version of the Clippers is. But with the 76ers, there is a maintenance program. And I think this is the other part of the conversation is, we need the maintenance program. We need Joel Embiid to be healthy for the playoffs and all those things. And I think it was Daryl Morey in that Tim Bontemps piece that said 45, 55, 65 wins, that much doesn't matter as much as making sure we're healthy for the playoffs. And while I don't necessarily disagree with that on its face, you do have to win some games here in the regular season. And what seed you are in the Eastern Conference is going to be really important, especially when we kind of get into the matchups of all this stuff. So you can't really just say the regular season doesn't matter and we're just trying to be healthy for the playoffs. You got to make the playoffs. And I think you want to be one of the, getting that number 2 seed could be great to avoid Boston until potentially the Eastern Conference Finals. Even getting a 3 seed means you get home court. Getting a 4 seed would be nice because you're at least getting home court there too, but I don't know that you can drop that much lower than that and have a realistic chance to come out of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and Morey also in that story told ESPN that he thinks this Boston team is the best team that the league has seen since the Durant-Curry Warriors, which I haven't thought enough about that to know where I fall on that. But at the very least, they're like the worst, or like second or third, right? Like that's the kind of this is an elite team that has elite numbers and has all these advantages, and they're going to be really hard to beat. They're in a world where we've had 6 champions in 6 years. That feels like a pretty reasonable team to think that they could be the ones that buck that trend to some degree.
Overwhelming championship favorites in Las Vegas. 88% of general managers pick them to repeat as champions. There's really no reason why the Celtics, if the Celtics don't win the championship, it'll be injuries or getting in their own way potentially. But I don't know that you can look on paper and say that there's another team that's more overpowering than them, at least not right now.
Yeah, and I think Philly could get there, and I think part of the reason I like this plan so much is, Wes, you said something really smart, which is that a lot of Embiid's injuries are random. He obviously he missed 2 years to start his career with something that could be chronic, or you could look at it as a little more worrisome. I think obviously was and could still be viewed as worrisome. He's had the knee issues and stuff, but the facial fractures where he got hit in the face inadvertently, and some of these things that have just caused him to miss time, those are a little bit random, and you can never control those. Like Darius Garland, for instance, got hit first game of the year last year, had a broken bone in his face. His season went off the rails from there. This stuff does just happen in the NBA. Injuries are random; they are uncontrollable. But this is as close as Daryl Morey, who is the ultimate control and system and process numbers guy that as we have as a team builder in the league. This is the closest he can get to controlling Embiid's risk and controlling the opportunities for Embiid to get whacked in the face and have a eye injury or a facial fracture again, or something that even like someone steps on his ankle and he has an ankle sprain. Mm-hmm. This is as close as Daryl Morey can get to controlling something he cannot control. And if Embiid plays 50 games and is healthy and they're the 2 seed or the 3 seed or something like that, that is worth the entire missing and maybe not getting the 1 seed, or Embiid getting another award or being eligible for anything. That is the whole point of this, is controlling as much as you can something that is by its definition uncontrollable.
Yeah, right. And it doesn't mean that the bad luck can't happen again. If Joel Embiid isn't playing on the second nights of back-to-back, he could get hurt on the first night of that back-to-back, right? Bad luck happens whenever bad luck's going to happen, but in reducing just the amount of time he's on the court, the games that he's played. And by the way, credit to Joel Embiid also. This isn't just talking the talk, right? This isn't what I like to call. I don't put Joel Embiid in team offseason revelations with Zion and Ben Simmons. He's actually walking the walk here. He lost 30 pounds. He's planning on doing more. All those things. And I do believe the comments where he says, look, I'm going to sit out these second nights of back-to-back. And he wants to accomplish the thing that he hasn't accomplished yet, which is that championship. So I give credit to Joel Embiid so far, but I think it is going to be. They just need to figure out how to balance that maintenance program with winning enough games to make it so that in the playoffs, obviously being healthy is the number one thing, but you also want to give yourself the easiest possible path in the playoffs as well. And a lot of that comes down to seeding. My other question too is if you're going to be careful with Paul George, do you stagger those nights that they sit out? Or do you make sure that they play together? So let's just take a back-to-back, for instance. Would you rest Paul George on the first night and then rest Joel Embiid on the second night? I think you could say, well, obviously that's the thing you do. You keep one of your superstar players on the court at all times. But the flip side of that is if they're staggering all that time, are they going to build enough chemistry by the time the playoffs come around and they got to go beat these teams when they're on the court together? It kind of goes both ways. It wouldn't shock me if they said, you know what, both these guys get the night off. It's the Tyrese Maxey show. For a night, and understanding that the second night of back-to-backs anyway is sort of a scheduled loss. Maybe you just write it off in that way anyway, and then you go full tilt in those other games so you can stack wins with Joel Embiid and Paul George on the court at the same time, because those games that Embiid isn't playing in, it's going to be really important to win the games now that he is playing in if you want to get a high enough seed. And I think probably the best way to do that is make sure when Joel Embiid is playing, have the rest of your guys out there, build that chemistry, go win those games by 20 points, right? Smack those other teams, and then just give everybody those kind of scheduled nights off when you're going to do it.
Yeah, look, there's going to be some tough back-to-backs. I'm looking at their schedule now. Like in early November, they have both games at home, but they have a back-to-back against the Knicks and then Cleveland. Like that's tough to like maybe punt on one of those games. That's not optimal considering those are to varying degrees teams that are view themselves as in the 76ers conversation. But you get in the season, it's like you get Charlotte and Orlando in early December. You're playing at Charlotte the first night, and Embiid gets to stay at home and play Magic in a more important game on night 2. You can probably roll out a lesser team and try to beat Charlotte on the road. Like, you can be very strategic about this with this intent going in, I think. You're not having to decide this based on Embiid's body feel, which I think based on how he talked in the story in West and what we know about him, this is a stubborn guy that wants to play all the time. Like, I don't believe that Joel Embiid enjoys being a 55-game season guy. I think this guy, if he could, would play all the time. I think that's how he's wired. Yep. This is now that you're going in intentionally, you can like really set an intentional course. And I think to your point about chemistry, it's entirely valid. But I think being intentional about this from the get-go does make this, in theory, easier to navigate. We haven't really seen anything quite like this. Couldn't think of like a comparable example for someone going quite on this plan aside from Kawhi. But Embiid and his connectivity to Philly makes this, to me, like the first of its kind maintenance plan.
I would argue, and now Dwayne Wade was at a different phase in his career, but the final year of the Big Three was a little bit similar. The other part about this, too, is that since Dwayne Wade and his maintenance program, and they even called it a maintenance program, they might have even sort of popularized that term when we talk about guys like Kawhi and Joel Embiid now. But doing this now in an article with a TV partner when the NBA is cracked down on stars resting games it's not the A story, it's not the B story, it's probably not even the C story with all of this stuff, but it is interesting to me nonetheless. And you look at a team like the 76ers who have a ton of national TV games. Like every other game for them is TNT, ESPN, ABC. Like they're on national TV a ton. And you mentioned the New York Cleveland back-to-back. The first night of that back-to-back is a primetime TNT game against the Knicks. And so usually when you hear about players resting in a back-to-back, it tends to be the second night of a back-to-back. But they could get hit with a fine or something here if they're going to rest them on that first night of the back-to-back against New York. No disrespect to your Cleveland Cavaliers, but the Knicks game is the one that's on TNT.
No, that's the most important game. That's the most important game. The Cavs game is lesser. It just is.
There's another one, too, which I think is Oklahoma City in New York, if I have that right. I had it up earlier. But it's sort of a similar situation where the second one is the one that's on national TV. So
also, the Knicks one also the one on national TV in that case.
Right, exactly. So, you've got that. This point was raised by Brian Windhorst, so I'm not trying to steal it here, but it's a great one. And with the in-season tournament now being a prominent thing in the NBA, you also are going to have to be pretty careful if you're going to rest Joel Embiid for a night. And by the way, we shouldn't just limit this to back-to-backs. It's the obvious ones that you can kind of circle on a calendar and say, yeah, probably not playing here. But there are going to be other nights where Joel Embiid takes off, right? Like there's going to be more than just the second night of back-to-backs. But the 76ers are going to have to be really careful because they're going to be pressured by the league, as every team will be, to make sure you're playing your stars in these in-season tournament games, right? And by the way, for a guy like Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, I know all these guys are multimillionaires that just signed supermax contracts, but there's still $500,000 on the line. So convincing them to rest might be unfair to them and to their teammates who aren't making $40 million a year. So just little like potholes that the 76ers, Joel Embiid, Paul George are going to have to navigate throughout the regular season in terms of when they're going to pick the nights that they're going to rest.
Yeah, but bet you Embiid's not playing April 9th at Washington would be my guess looking at the schedule. You know, like just a hunch. He's maybe not.
Good night for Jonas Valanciunas to go to work then.
Andre Drummond, Valanciunas, as Washington is trying to lose to get Cooper Flag is where that game feels headed.